This episode is sponsored in part by our friends at Vultr, spelled V-U-L-T-R, because they're all about helping save money, including on things like, vowels. So what they do is they are a cloud provider that provides surprisingly high performance cloud compute at a price that, well, sure, they claim it is better than AWS's pricing, and when they say that, they mean that it's less money. Sure, I don't dispute that. But what I find interesting is that it's predictable. They tell you in advance on a monthly basis what it's going to cost. They have a bunch of advanced networking features. They have 19 global locations and scale things elastically, not to be confused with openly, which is apparently elastic and open. They can mean the same thing sometimes. They have had over 1 million users. Deployments take less than 60 seconds across 12 pre-selected operating systems, or if you're one of those nutters like me, you can bring your own ISO and install basically any operating system you want. Starting with pricing as low as $2.50 a month for Vultr Cloud Compute, they have plans for developers and businesses of all sizes except maybe Amazon, who stubbornly insists on having something of the scale on their own. But you don't have to take my word for it with an exclusive offer for you. Sign up today for free and receive $100 in credits to kick the tires and see for yourself. Get started at vultr.com/morningbrief. That's VULTR.com/morningbrief.
Two Aurora's serverless diverged in a prod account, and sorry I could not deploy to both. And being one developer, long I stood, and looked into V2 as far as I could, to where it scaled beyond my budget. Then looked at the first just as arcane, and having perhaps the better model, because it scaled to 0 and had a data API, though it did not support multiple regions, and scaling up dropped connections unto the ground. I shall be telling this with a sigh. On-call pages and pages hence, two Aurora's serverless diverged in a prod account, and I took the one newly launched, and now production is both expensive and broken. The woeful tale of AWS's diverging Aurora serverless offerings began when Amazon Aurora Serverless V1 was announced at reInvent 2017. V1 has some problems that are a bit gnarly and, frankly, make it tough to justify trusting it with production. So I was on board when Aurora Serverless V2 was announced at reInvent 2020. It became generally available after a 1.5-year period of public preview and purports to solve all of the problems with V1. But each word of Aurora Serverless V2 is a lie. Aurora is AWS's custom database engine that's named after a fairy tale princess. Unlike every Disney movie you ever watched as a kid, AWS's relational database services fall short of the implicit promise for a happy ending assured to heroines from Ariel to Jasmine to Eve. Serverless gets the bulk of my irritation here. Unlike its predecessor, Aurora Serverless V2 actually offers multi-region capabilities, but it violates other implicit promises of serverless. Most abhorrently, it doesn't scale to 0. V2 is the final betrayal. The second version of an AWS service is supposed to be notably better across the board and able to entirely supplant the version 1. As it stands now, Aurora Serverless V2 is nowhere near that point. The implicit promise of serverless is you pay per request, and when it's not in use, it scales to 0. Yes, you pay for data storage, but that's always been the case. Aurora Serverless V1 understood this. It scaled down to nothing and would stop charging you. The first request would wake the system up, albeit at a potential latency cost of up to a minute. Okay, not great, but surely V2 can fix this. Well, it did, but in the worst possible way. Buried in the documentation, AWS states that currently, Aurora Serverless V2 writers and readers don't scale all the way down to 0 ACUs. As a result, the lowest you'll pay a month for one of these things is the princely sum of just shy of $45. Explain to me again why, for light workloads, you wouldn't just run your database engine of choice on the less expensive RDS instance or even on top of EC2. I really hope that this gets fixed between the time that I'm recording this and the time I publish it, because calling Aurora Serverless V2 serverless is going to get folks sideways about what the term really means. Sadly, there's a strong argument that it's already a lost cause.
This episode is sponsored in parts by our friend Enterprise DB. Enterprise DB has been powering enterprise applications with PostgreSQL for 15 years, and now Enterprise DB has you covered wherever you deploy PostgreSQL, on premises, private cloud, and they just announced a fully managed service on AWS and Azure called Big Animal, all one word. Don't leave managing your database to your cloud vendor because they're too busy launching another half dozen managed databases to focus on any one of them that they didn't build themselves. Instead, work with the experts over at Enterprise DB. They can save you time and money. They can even help you migrate legacy applications, including Oracle, to the cloud. To learn more, try Big Animal for free. Go to biganimal.com/snark and tell them Corey sent you.
One of the reasons to have a serverless database is that AWS handles all of the scaling problems attendant to serverless applications. It could be sitting there idle, then 5,000 Lambda functions spin up and basically pummel the database to death. Aurora Serverless v1 handled this super well by introducing a data API that Lambdas can hit without knocking the underlying service over with a flood of new connection requests all at once. And for some workloads, this is awesome. The Aurora Serverless v2 eschewed using this entirely, instead opting to use Amazon RDS proxy. Now, this thing's minimum charge is another 12 cents an hour on top of the underlying Aurora Serverless v2 databases, while still forcing you to manage the database connection pooling yourself, lest your Lambdas once again hug the thing to death. I keep hoping there's something key that I'm missing here, but other reviews all say the same thing. The confusing part of all of this to me is that Aurora Serverless v2 was in preview from December 2020 to April 2022. AWS had ample time to take a solid whack at a v2 that truly fixed the problems with the first version, then let it become functionally deprecated as everyone moved to v2. Instead, we're staring down two diverging roads for Aurora Serverless. AWS now has a v1 and a v2 of the same service, each offering different capabilities and different trade-offs. They amount to two different services that are sold under the same name. Customers are going to be confused. Hell, I'm confused. I have to hope and trust that this is a temporary situation that'll rapidly improve, but as of today, I'm unconvinced.
This has been a Humble Pod production. Stay humble.